Okay, so I'm gonna do a profile on George Floyd. I'm gonna profile the George Floyd case, but I'm also gonna include Ahmaud Arbery because these things are relevant. And this is all forensic psychology skills, but this was years before I even knew about forensic psychology. I didn't know the term, I didn't know what it was. I've seen a few movies here and there, but no idea that it was a real thing. Let's get into it. So, I don't believe in trigger warnings. I believe in psychological resilience. Just read a thing about how certain practitioners of the field that I'm going for suffer something called vicarious trauma, which does make sense. However, because of experiences like this, we are shaped by our experiences as the wind can shape a tree. I have lost a lot of empathy. I actually, from arguing with people that were lying on social media, who I now think the government was doing a lot of the lying, along with political, parasites and things like that. But I digress. I ended up losing a lot of empathy. I no longer experience the manipulation. And I find that profoundly interesting because that may seem offensive or irrelevant or insignificant, but according to the vicarious trauma study, the toolkit, certain forensic psychologists can experience vicarious trauma reading about a case that is particularly, difficult, such as a child abuse case or, a mass murder. And so I find that psychological resilience. One thing I did with my exercises and self-applied rehabilitation and things like that was I reduced my involuntary stress response by reducing my involuntary emotional response. Physical exercise had a lot to do with that. A healthy metabolism, a healthy heart rate, sobriety, like abstinence from drugs, all of that definitely gave me this psychological, mental and emotional stability. And so I don't think it's my responsibility to avoid stressing people, because some people will develop emotional bonds to fictional characters and experience vicarious trauma from fiction. Right? The Avengers movie, I was so traumatized. Some people go through trauma if Facebook is down for 6 hours or 2 hours. Other people can go through a lot more. I'd rather be the more resilient that can endure a lot more difficult circumstances, just psychologically difficult, not even physically difficult. But I noticed the more physical, the better physical shape that I was in, the better mental shape that I was in. It really does help. So, during the whole Trump thing in 2018, I believe it was, it might have been 2019, the whole George Floyd thing started happening with COVID. I was going for nursing. I did the anatomy coloring book, and in doing the coloring book, I figured out all the neck muscles, windpipes. I love this stuff. The brachial tree, the different lobes of the lungs, and how they're asymmetrical, just like the tree. The little piece of bone there, they get the thymus. I can't remember it all now. It's been a few years, but so I could tell that the death of George Floyd was not caused by the knee on the back of his neck. Now, I also knew that because I used to be, when I was in my severely psychotic homeless state, I was a protester, and I was on the far left, and so I actually fought with police in March 15th and February 28th, 2001 or 2002, right before we went to war with Iraq. 9/11 happened, we were going to invade Iraq, so I believe it was 2002, it might have been 2003. And I had knees on the back of my neck, and I did not die because I didn't have the drugs in my system that Mr. Floyd did. Now, I want to be clear about this. This is not intended to be racist against anybody, black people, white people, etc. This is not meant to be a pro-white, white supremacist video. This is not meant to be a pro-black video. It's weird to me that these two races get all the spotlight, given that both come from across the Atlantic. Right? Europe and Africa are on the other side of the ocean, and America, like there's other ethnicities, that exist, including ones that were here prior to African and European arrival. But the blacks and the whites, they got to get the best, all the attention. Nobody else matters, I guess, or something. So this is neither pro-white nor pro-black. This is just objective facts. And it's also insane to me that expressing the truth can get people fired, can get people canceled, expelled from university. The objective truth is all that matters in investigation, in forensic psychology especially. And so it's insane to me to witness that so many judges, cops, politicians, etc., they could all and probably already have been fired for simply expressing the truth that was counter and dissident to the mainstream establishment narrative, which is a false narrative. It's a crafted narrative, and crafted through mediums like social media and the internet. So in 2019, I was on Reddit. The George Floyd thing had just happened, and then I was countering the narrative. I was posting like crazy about how the knee on the neck could not have been the cause of death. It was probably, eventually I did figure out later on, it was a drug overdose death. It was not asphyxiation. I had a lot of morons and liars telling me all kinds of crazy stuff. All of a sudden, everyone's an expert, and they're telling me things that go directly against the medical science. One guy tried to say he's a judo expert. In judo, they have a brain choke. And I said, yeah, so that's actually cutting the carotid artery to the brain, not oxygen to the lungs. The blood flows through the brain on the side of the neck, not the back of the neck. The carotid arteries, and that's apoxia, I believe it is. Hypoxia, anoxia, maybe? I can't remember the term. Oxygen deprivation to the brain from blood deprivation to the brain was not how George Floyd died, nor was it asphyxiation. His windpipe, his trachea, they were not obstructed. He could breathe. The reason he could not breathe was because the stimulants in his system caused cardiac arrest, respiratory seizure, no systemic racism killed George Floyd. And that will really come out when I get into the profile. But while that was going on, all of a sudden on Reddit, this footage of Ahmaud Arbery came out. And prior to that, I had actually gone to the Academy of Art University and taken some courses in film. And so I've learned one of the propaganda techniques is to alter the audio of a video, of footage. And the first thing I noticed with this video was there was no audio. The audio had been removed. And I found that very, very suspicious. But even with the audio removed, and I'll play it here in a second and really show you what I'm talking about, but Ahmaud Arbery was not a victim of racism. So there's two white guys parked waiting for him as he comes jogging around the corner, and a third one following him from behind. 3 vehicles, I believe. I'm going to rewatch the footage, so I could be wrong. And even with the audio removed, the first person to make physical contact is Ahmaud Arbery. He jumps towards a man holding a gun, grabs the gun with one hand, and starts punching him with the other, and then they shoot him. Of course they shoot him. What do you think he's going to do when he gets a hold of this guy's gun? He's going to kill them. So let me just set this up. Oh, why does that flash come on? That is so annoying. Sorry. I got this other tabs open, but... So here we go. I'm just going to do the same thing they did, remove the audio. And just give me 1 second here. So I'm just going to clock this, right? These poor guys. Clear shot at 27 seconds. Clear shot, 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 clear shot. Not then look, there he goes. Now, that is 27 seconds to 44 seconds that these white evil racists had a clear shot and did not take it. So clearly their plan was not to kill him. Ooh. Here we have Ahmaud Arbery grabbing the gun, right? He jogs around the truck, closes the distance. A gun is a distance weapon. They could have fired on him long before he got close. No, they waited. They hesitated. Right? You got this guy in the truck with the gun. Now, I've been in the South, in Virginia, and had a man pull up with a gun on me because I was talking to his wife a few minutes prior on her porch at her house, and he's like, I just want to check you out. Make sure you're all right. So I used my words instead of my fists. I used my brain instead of my fists, and I lived. Something called communication. Sorry, I shouldn't mock the dead. That's unprofessional of me. I will seriously work on that. It's just really difficult to take this seriously because it was such a heinous lie that got promoted by the government. This is impossible to interpret as anything but malice and hostility by the government towards its own people for political, financial, globalist agendas, economic terraforming, government terraforming. The harmful impact of this still has repercussions today. So, yeah. Here we go. Grabs the gun. Punch, 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 punch. You can't really see it, but yeah. Still wrestling with the gun, and they cut it off. So, yeah. He, oh man, I accidentally paused this. Now I forgot where I was at. So I'm just going to continue. So back then, that was like months before the George Floyd thing, this incident actually happened. And the guys were acquitted. They were acquitted because they didn't do anything. They didn't actually kill anybody except in self-defense. Anyone with half a brain could see that Ahmaud Arbery was the first one to close the distance, make contact, grab the gun, and start assaulting a man with a gun, trying to take his gun from him. So yeah, I gotta check where this left off. Okay, so yeah, at that time, I thought it was like Antifa maybe is moderating Reddit, but I definitely realized that social engineer manipulation was choosing which posts get boosted, which posts get suppressed. They control the views, they control the likes, they control all of it. Pure psychological manipulation of the masses through social media. And so that particular clip with the audio removed was being promoted. And here I was exercising critical thinking, pointing out all these inconsistencies, that clearly this was a dishonest video. And if you find the audio, the men with the guns, the evil white men, they said, we just want to talk. And it was insane to witness everyone lie about it from the government. The guys, the white guys, they were acquitted. The charges were dropped against them because it was investigated. And then the whole George Floyd thing happened, and the DA pressured somebody and somebody else, and so they were, again, brought up on charges and convicted. And their convictions were wrong. They were falsely convicted based purely on emotion, based because the government, or whoever runs the government, had pushed the American public into a frenzied state with social media as the weapon. They were specifically inciting racial violence on a mass scale deliberately against white people. And so that really leads into the whole George Floyd thing, right? So that's when I realized that there's Google, Meta, Microsoft, Reddit, Twitter. It's all weaponized by the government against its own citizens. And people got killed. Like, innocent people died, lives were destroyed, the government, Google, etc., they could not give a crap. Right? These were good people. So good white people, bad white people, etc. And that's when I really began to lose my emotional response and my empathy, because nobody had empathy for the victims of this agenda. Nobody, if there was any empathy, it was censored, it was suppressed, it was removed. It was not boosted, right? Freedom of speech, not freedom of reach, by these software engineer manipulators that are manipulating the masses by manipulating the internet, social media, search engines, lines of communication, etc. There are insane legal and ethical violations committed by the government during the George Floyd riots and COVID. I couldn't even begin to do that. Like, that they're just getting away with. These people got away with it. Darrell Brooks, what's that called? The Bail Project. Yeah, so this lady, some white lady of all things, pushed the whole systemic racism. It's amazing how many parasites jumped on the death of George Floyd. Just like COVID, they twisted it for their own agendas. Nothing, didn't give a crap about him, but pretended they did. And so she got Darrell Brooks released early, and cannabis was something he was smoking, and he decided to murder, I can't remember how many white Christians, but there was a Jewish woman, and they were ethnically Jewish, but, you know, a Christian, a white Jewish Christian. In Waukesha, Wisconsin, or something like that. And that's interesting in itself. Just to show objectivity here, there was another man named Robert Bowers who was identical to Darrell Brooks, only he was a white and targeted Jews. Now, when you analyze and profile these mass murderers, you find identical causes and motives. Causes would be cannabis use, cannabis-induced psychosis, mass murders. It happens all the time. Like, it's rare to find a mass murder that there was not a history of cannabis use or cannabis use at the time. Also, incitement by social media. Now, Robert Bowers was incited by Gab, which is the far-right social media. And their CEO, Andrew Torba, was in court and had to testify and all this stuff and, you know, etc. But Darrell Brooks, also cannabis and social media, was incited by Google and Facebook and Twitter and Reddit, and the same thing. These mods who were boosting these posts showing black dudes being killed by white dudes with no context, and people like Darrell Brooks didn't exercise critical thinking to say, well, actually, the black guy was kind of, you know, he deserved it. He brought it upon himself. Had he been emotionally stable, psychologically stable, legally compliant, like, there's so many ways to have prevented that outcome, to prevent his own death through his choices, decisions, and actions. But somehow black accountability is like literally Hitler. So it was another bias that I found in the judicial system, because Robert Bowers was brought on federal hate crime charges and given the death penalty. And he had a couple of participants, friends, whatever you want to call them, co-conspirators, co-criminals, who were also planning a bombing terrorist attack or something like that. And they had a marijuana growing operation with a bunch of swastika flags in the grow room. So clearly, cannabis is a contributing factor to both of these mass murdering psychotics. And so is racism. Robert Bowers targeted Jews at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pennsylvania, I believe Philadelphia. A federal hate crime. Darrell Brooks targeted white Christians. No death penalty, no federal charges. Poor Mr. Black Man. He just couldn't handle the video of George Floyd in Ahmaud Arbery. But I could, because that was pure emotional manipulation. I did not fall for it. It had no effect on me. Doesn't mean I hate black people. Doesn't mean I hate white people. Doesn't mean I hate anybody. It just means I care about the truth. That's something that really blew my mind, is Liberty University has the Jerry Falwell Library, but you cannot find George Floyd's toxicology and autopsy report. And now I expect that from like atheist universities, but that's one of the things I think that pissed him off. Was I was asking, well, shouldn't Christians care about the truth? Like, aren't you guys, you know, thou shalt not tell a lie. Ooh. They didn't care. Anyway, into the George Floyd. So George Floyd's autopsy report, I doubt I could find it on my current university or any other university I'll ever attend's library. But here it is on Google. No life-threatening injuries identified, natural diseases, heart disease, hypertensive disease, blunt force injuries, cutaneous blunt force injuries, forehead, face, upper lip, mucosal injuries of the lips, cutaneous blunt force injuries of the shoulders, hands, elbows, and legs, pattern contusions of the wrists consistent with restraints. So none of those are life-threatening injuries. Those are superficial. No life-threatening, hence no life-threatening injuries identified. Yeah. No chest wall soft tissue injuries, rib fractures, other than one from trying to save his life, CPR, vertical column injuries, visceral incision, nope, occult trauma. That's weird. Probably look that up. COVID. It's insane to me that the government's getting away with this kind of stuff. Like, they will never be held accountable for all the heinous stuff they did during COVID. All the abuses of power. Blood, drug, and novel psychoactive substance in screens. Fentanyl, 11 ng, something per milliliter. Milligrams per milliliter? I don't know. Norfentanyl, 4-ANP, I don't know what that even is. Methamphetamine, 19 ng per milliliter. 11-hydroxy, delta-9 THC, delta-9 carboxy THC, delta-9 THC. Cotinine positive, caffeine positive, blood volatiles. Yeah. Urine drug screen positive for cannabinoids, amphetamines, and fentanyl/metabolite. Now I'm also going to show this video. Now this is, they pulled it down, but somebody did a mirror. This was on the NBC YouTube. It might still be, but I doubt it. So this is security video, the street security footage for George Floyd's arrest. And what I really want you to do is pay attention to this little corner here, because he drops a small plastic baggie with a light powdery substance. Excuse me while I hit play. Dun, dun, dun. There it is. Do you see that? See that little white square that wasn't there, and he's doing it behind his back so the cops can't see him, so he's avoiding a charge. If the cops can't see it, they don't know he's on drugs, for one. And that, you know, if they would have seen that, they probably might have been able to prevent him dying from the drug overdose death. But that is clearly a small plastic baggie with a white powdery substance. Now he's leaning over it like he's trying to hide it from the cops. That's the stuff that killed him. Like, and again, I shouldn't laugh, it's unprofessional, but I can't help it, because this lie caused so much harm. So many lives are destroyed by this lie that the government pushed about systemic racism, and George Floyd died of, you know, the evil racist cops, and oh my goodness. It's a nightmare what the government has done to the United States. People deserve to be executed for treason. It's insane. So anyhow, I'm gonna fast forward here a bit. So they get him up, and the baggie is still there. Gosh darn it. Yeah. There you go. Baggie is still there. Now, sorry I only have one hand, so I'm just going to do it like this. Baggie not there. Baggie there. So that's the basis of my profile, is the toxicology report. Now, if you do a timeline analysis of the information available on George Floyd, odds are that he first had marijuana pushed on him at a very young age, likely possibly 5 years old, but at the very least by elementary school, 3rd to 5th grade. And marijuana acted as a gateway drug, not just to harder drugs, but also to crime. I believe his first conviction was late middle school or early high school, and then repeated convictions after that. So this didn't make any sense to me. If the whole Black Lives Matter movement actually cared about black lives, they should be against marijuana legalization. Because it's pretty obvious that marijuana was a significant, if not primary, causal component to not just the death of George Floyd, but the life of George Floyd, the hard drug use, the history of felonies, the criminal history. Cannabis was there from the beginning to the end. I guarantee it. And that profile probably describes a lot of black people that you know and I know. Anyone watching this, including black people, right? How many do you know that had weed pushed on them by their parents or peers or siblings, at least by 3rd grade or 5th grade? growing up in a low income, poor neighborhoods and things like that. So it's insane to me that the government got away with this, that politicians weren't executed for hijacking the death of George Floyd and falsely framing it as a racism thing when it was a drug thing. Also hijacking COVID and just abuse of government and political power for agenda implementation. And the internet had a lot to do with it. Social media was weaponized by the very people who were at the top, so to speak, in control. I remember thinking, oh yeah, Donald Trump's fighting the globalists and the deep state. No, he is a globalist. He's one of them. He's part of the show. He's just another puppet. Did he pardon Derek Chauvin? No, he sucked up to the blacks for the votes. And that Biden's also garbage too. I'm not saying it's either Republicans or Democrats. No. They're all humans. And humans are susceptible to corruption. There's no perfect system of government because of human nature. Communism, capitalism, National Socialism, libertarianism. What do the Chinese call their communism now? State-controlled communism or something? Democratic socialism. Yeah, it's all just isms. Human nature screws it all up. Every dictatorship, democracy, you name it, it's always human nature that makes every system corrupt from within. And so it's really crazy to me that the very people pushing marijuana legalization are also the ones that pushed the riots and caused white women to be raped by black men during these riots, with the police doing nothing. There was police reports on that, which to me is really sad. But that's what makes me lose empathy. I can't let that get to me emotionally. I can't let those things get under my skin. For one, it'll cause a racial bias, and I do not want that. But for two, it'll cause, it'll impact my decision and analysis making. My decision making and analytical efficacy. So I have to remain stoic. Either way, I'm not saying blacks are the villains. I'm not saying blacks are the victims. I'm saying that the Epstein Island client list was behind the George Floyd riots, COVID, social engineering through social media, also behind marijuana legalization, the demographic shifts, immigration. It's all globalist agendas, and it all has to do with global economic trade, global economic markets, asymmetrical power relationships between various states like the United States and Iran and the European Union. It's not as simple as it's presented by the propaganda. And I still see this propaganda today. The White House will flood Twitter and other social media sites with really, really terrible propaganda, where they're like, ICE is back, immigration customs enforcement, and the videos are practically directed by Michael Bay. It's some slutty looking prostitute in an ICE uniform with her hair flowing in the wind, and she's riding a 4-wheeler near the border, and you got the camera on a track and a 3-camera setup, and it's the lighting is just right. And morons fall for that the same way they fell for this. And I'm not going to be hired for simply doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Should I be hired for doing my job the right way, correctly, and cutting through the lies and finding the truth and then expressing the truth on social media? And therefore, well, the government lied about all this stuff. The government lied about George Floyd's death. The government lied about Ahmaud Arbery's death. The government lies about marijuana being harmless. The government lies about a ton of stuff. And they get away with it. They lied about COVID. They lied about everything. But if I point out they're lying, not hired, expelled, banned from campus, right? Investigated, like. But I'm a victim of the cannabis industry, so that's got to be weird in itself, because they're like, well, you know, he did fry his hand off and parts of his feet in cannabis-induced psychosis, so clearly he has a valid statement that he's making here. This is obviously the truth, that marijuana causes harms like what happened to him, but that's not what the paycheck signers want to hear. So it's really difficult for me. It's not that difficult, but it kind of is. It's difficult for me to embrace this notion that I am supposed to self-censor these truths. That George Floyd did not die of systemic racism. It was a drug overdose death. That Ahmaud Arbery was not murdered by racism. He caused his own death by jumping at a man with a gun when there's two other guys with guns. He's outnumbered and outgunned, and he jumped at one, grabbed the guy's gun, and started punching him, while the second guy had a clear shot. That's just the truth. But somehow these white guys are rotting in prison because everyone is emotionally manipulated to hate white people. It's weird. I'm not saying white people don't deserve it. Like, I'm not taking any sides here. I just want the objective truth. I'm neither condemning nor condoning. I'm simply observing that these charges were false. The convictions were wrong. They were false. And these men are innocent. But because of politics and media, what if it's not even real? What if Derek Chauvin was like an AI thing? What if there was no George Floyd? What if Donald Trump died like 3 months ago and they're just going to run his whole campaign from AI generated video clips? And like Trump doubles, you know, look-alike that did the plastic surgery to look like Trump. Saddam Hussein had a few of those in case somebody tried to assassinate him. I wonder how many Trump doubles there are, and if the real Donald Trump is like, maybe he's cryogenically frozen on Epstein Island. Like, I can't trust any of it. The government has lied to me so much, and the same people who push these lies that cause lives to be destroyed, like mine. My life was destroyed by the lie they pushed that cannabis is harmless and everybody loves it and blah, 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 blah. And they're not held accountable at all. That is a power structure. That is a hierarchy. Right? These people can cause the deaths of thousands and thousands of people and not receive a single day in court. But somehow, poor people like me, right? If the only punishment for a crime is a fine, those laws only apply to the poor. I get banned, censored, etc. for simply pointing out the lies that these oligarchs and plutocrats are forcing down the throats of the masses through the electronic devices, through the data communication networks, through Google, through Microsoft, through Meta. And these same people are telling me, we will make it so you will not get hired if you tell the truth about our lies. We will label it as hate speech, and you'll be canceled, I believe was a popular term. That's nuts to me, because the whole point of being a forensic psychologist is to find the truth. It's like the Inquisitor in Europe. You know, you're just supposed to pay attention to the facts, not the politics, not the emotions, solely the facts. Does systemic racism exist? I don't know. It might, but it might not. I'm skeptical to the notion, because this that was presented as evidence of systemic racism was clearly a lie. So that would have the backfire effect on critical thinkers like me. But the majority of the masses are gullible. So maybe I should just learn to lie, including lying by omission. And the next George Floyd that I see, I should just shut my mouth and not point out that it's a psyop by the government and their, banker corporate bosses. One more point I forgot to make. It's insane to me that Gab was held accountable for its role in inciting violence, but Facebook and its parent company Meta and Google and Microsoft were not. Because if hate speech is speech that incites violence, well, all the anti-white violence that was incited by Facebook and Reddit and Twitter and Google and etc., all the social engineering through those companies, they got away with it. They get impunity that Andrew Torba did not. And I'm not saying Andrew Torba is like the good guy here, not at all. He's just the same thing. He just has less money. That's all it was. That's another evidence of the bias and ethical violations of the government, media, and corporate power structure that runs the United States.